Morning. Today we will study part 5 of Syllogism, Moods and Enthymemes. First, let us know the rules of figure 3. We know that in figure 3 of categorical syllogism, the middle term stands as the subject of both the premises, the major premise and the minor premise. On the basis of the position of the middle term, we get two rules of syllogism. First one is the minor premise must be affirmative, and second is the conclusion must be particular. Now let us prove the rule 1 of figure 3. Here the rule 1 of figure 3 is that the minor premise must be affirmative. Suppose we assume that the minor premise is negative, then the conclusion will have to be negative as per the rule of syllogism, that if one of the premise is negative, then the conclusion must be negative. So obviously the major premise will have to be affirmative because no conclusion can be drawn from two negative premises. If the minor premise is negative, then the measure will have to be affirmative. And we already know that in a negative proposition, the predicate is distributed. So obviously, in the conclusion, the predicate will be distributed. So it has to be distributed in the measure premise to avoid the fallacy of illicit measure. If the predicate has to be distributed in the measure premise, then the measure premise will have to be negative. And not affirmative, right? If the measure premise is negative, obviously the minor premise will have to be affirmative to draw the conclusion, because we already know that if one of the premise is negative, the conclusion is negative, and so the major premise is negative. But what about the minor premise? It has to be affirmative because no conclusion can be drawn from two negative premises. Hence, our assumption that the minor premise must be negative is false, and the rule 1 of figure 3, that the minor premise must be affirmative, is proved to be true. Now let us prove the rule 2 of figure 3. What is the rule 2 of figure 3? That the conclusion must be particular. But we have studied already the rule 1 of figure 3, which says that the minor premise must be affirmative. This is proved. So it does not distribute the minor term which stands as the predicate of that proposition. See here, the minor term, the subject term of the conclusion stands as the predicate of the minor premise. So it is not distributed. So it has not to be distributed in the conclusion also for the syllogism to be valid, right? So the subject term of only particular propositions is not distributed because it refers to the part of the class. You know that any term is not distributed, it remains undistributed when it refers to the part of the class. And in particular propositions, the subject term refers to the part of the class. So, hence the conclusion must be particular proposition, where the subject term is undistributed. Now we come to the valid moods of figure 3. Let us see the combinations, which we get. Now rules of figure 3 are the minor premise must be affirmative, and secondly the conclusion must be particular. From this, what can you say? On the basis of the above two rules of figure 3, the combinations AE and AO are rejected. Why? Because in both these combinations, the minor premise is negative. And as per the rules of figure 3, the minor premise must be affirmative. The remaining 6 combinations yield valid conclusions in figure 3. What are they? These are AA, AI, EA, EI, IA, and A. Now let us see the valid moves of figure 3. Let us see the first combination of AA. As per the rule of figure 3, the conclusion must be particular. So obviously, the conclusion will be either I or O. But the conclusion cannot be O. Why? Because both the premises are affirmative, so the conclusion must be affirmative. Hence, the conclusion will be particular affirmative, that is I proposition. This mood is AAI and it is called as Darapti. Let us take an example of this mood. 1. Darapti, figure 3. It is AAI. All women are beautiful. All women are powerful. Therefore, some powerful females are beautiful. Your woman will be the middle term and powerful will be the subject term and beautiful will be the predicate term. This argument of categorical syllogism does not violate any rules of syllogism. Hence, it is a valid mood of Darapati and it is called as Darapati AAI combination. Then we come to valid moods of figure 3, the second combination of AI. Here again, both the premises are affirmative propositions. So, the conclusion will be affirmative. And since this minor premise is particular, the conclusion will be particular. Hence, the conclusion will be particular affirmative proposition, that is I proposition. This mood is AII and it is called as Datisi. Datisi. The example of the valid mood to Datisi of figure 3 is AIR. Let us take an example. All rich people are honored. Some rich people are generous. Therefore, some generous are honored. Here, rich people is the middle term and generous is the subject term and honored is the predicate term. This is a valid mood and it is called as Datisi AII combination because it does not violate any rules of syllogism. Now let us see the valid moods of figure 3, the third combination, that is EA. Here you can see that according to the rule of figure 3, the conclusion is a particular proposition. And here we can see that the measure premise is E proposition. So is a negative, universal negative proposition. So obviously the conclusion has to be negative. As per the rule of categorical syllogism, when one of the premise is negative, the conclusion must be negative. So the conclusion must be negative. Now, since the conclusion as per the rule of figure 3 is a particular proposition, hence the conclusion will be particular negative proposition, that is O proposition. This mood is EAO and it is called as Felapton. Now let us take an example of the valid mood 3 Felapton of figure 3, that is EAO. No confident person are discouraged. All confident persons are businessmen. Therefore, some businessmen are not discouraged. Here, confident persons is the middle term. Businessmen is the subject term and discouraged is the predicate term. This categorical syllogism does not violate any rules of syllogism. So it is the valid mood and it is called as Felapton EAO combination. Now we come to the valid mood of figure 3, fourth combination, that is EI. You can see here that the conclusion has to be particular as per the rule, and the second minor premise will also particular, so the conclusion will be particular proposition. Then the major premise is negative, so the conclusion must be negative. Hence, the conclusion will be particular negative proposition. This mood is EIO proposition, that is, it is called as Ferison. Let us take an example of the valid mood 4 Ferison of figure 3. Its combination is EIO. And here the example is no buildings are old, some buildings are tall, therefore some tall monuments are not old. Your buildings will be the middle term and tall will be the subject term. Old will be the predicate term. This categorical syllogism of figure 3 Ferison does not violate any rules of categorical syllogism and therefore it is the valid mood of the combination EIO. Let us understand the valid moods of figure 3, the fifth combination, the combination of IA. Here you can see that both the premises are affirmative, so obviously the conclusion will be affirmative. Now, as per the rule of figure 3, the conclusion must be particular and even the measure premise is particular, so obviously the conclusion has to be particular. Hence, the conclusion will be particular affirmative I proposition. This mood is IAI and it is called as Disamis. Now let us take an example of the valid mood 5 Disamis of figure 3 IAI. Some astrological predictions are true. All astrological predictions are scientific. Therefore, some scientific things are true. Let us see the middle term. Astrological predictions is the middle term. Scientific is the subject term and true is the predicate term. This fifth combination of IAI called as Disamis does not violate any rules of categorical syllogism. Hence, it is a valid mood. You have to check each and every rule of categorical proposition, categorical syllogism, find out whether it is a valid rule. If you check it, then you will find that it does not violate any of the rules of syllogism. Hence, it is a valid rule. Now we will learn the valid modes of figure 3 combination 6, that is the combination of OA. You can see that the major premise here is a particular proposition, and as per the rule of figure 3, obviously the conclusion has to be particular, but it is also negative. So if one of the premises is negative, then the conclusion has to be negative as per the rule of syllogism. So obviously the conclusion will be particular negative, that is O proposition. So this mood will be OAO and it is called as Bocardo. Now let us take an example of the valid mood 6, Bocardo of figure 3. OAO. Let us see the example. Some books are not descriptive. All books are the result of hard work. Therefore, some hard work done is not descriptive. Your books is the middle term. Hard work is the subject term and descriptive is the predicate term. If you check the rules of categorical syllogism, you will find that this categorical syllogism does not violate any rules of syllogism and hence it is the valid move of the combination 6 OAO called as Bocardo. Now we get 6 valid moves of figure 3. The rules of figure 3 are that the minor premise must be affirmative. You can see in every combination the minor premise is affirmative. In the first combination, it is A, which is affirmative. In the second combination, it is I, it is affirmative. Third combination, it is A, it is affirmative. Fourth combination, it is I, it is affirmative. Fifth combination, it is A, it is affirmative. Sixth combination, it is A, it is affirmative. And the conclusion must be particular. So in all six combinations, the conclusion is a particular proposition. It's I in first, second, I, third and fourth it is O, fifth it is I, and sixth it is O. Now we get six combinations. AAI, it is called as Darapti. AII, it is called as Datisi. Then it is third is EAO, it is called Felapton. Fourth is EIO, it is called Ferison. IAI, it is called Disamis. OAO, it is called Bocardo. So we get 6 valid modes of figure 3. In this session, we have studied the valid modes of figure 3. There are 6. Right? So next session we will study valid moves of figure 4. Thank you.